I am Jessie Mahoney. I think I know most of you. I am a pediatrician and a yoga instructor, and also a what I call a mindful life coach. So I'm certified as a coach, and I like to blend mindfulness into coaching. And I run a coaching business called Pause and Presence, and I do a coaching on almost everything. I consider myself like a family practice coach because I like to bring everything together. And as a pediatrician by training, I'm also a mom of three who are older now. My youngest is 16 and my oldest is 25. I have three boys. And all of those roles help you. All of them require mindfulness and all of them require coaching, and they're all interdependent. So even if you are a physician, and I think most of you are, whether you're practicing or not, whether you're even acting as a grandma, all of these things blend together and can't really be separated. So I think sometimes we think, oh, the coaching is for work, or the coaching is for my relationship, or it's for my role as a mom. And since we're going to talk about love tonight, we often think love is really just for relationships. And so what I want to offer is that love is for everything. And this is partly inspired by February as Love Month, but also because I've started to incorporate it as truly a strategy. And I think many of us who are type A high achievers, which most people here are, we push ourselves as a strategy, and we make checklists and we accomplish as a strategy. And many of us are mean to ourselves as a strategy, as opposed to loving ourselves. And so if you think about it as a strategy, which is sort of the antithesis of what many of us think about love as, it can be this really incredible tool that makes life way better. It also makes your relationships way better. And that includes with your health and with those you love and those you work with and those you take care of. And I think many of us think about love as maybe a fluff thing rather than this sort of maybe what I would like to call like an animating force. It's really powerful. And it is something that as a yoga teacher comes up a lot. It also comes up in mindfulness, and it's a real integral component to mindfulness, which many of us sort of don't pay attention to. We pay a lot of attention to presence. We pay a lot of attention to noticing and awareness, but we often don't pay attention to love. And it's not, if you think about John Kabat-Zinn's list of things that are encompassed in mindfulness, love is not on the list, but it's part of so many things on the list. So it's part of non-judgment. It's part of non-striving. It's part of compassion. It's part of generosity. So those are the ones that pop to mind. And so love actually comes into all of the facets of mindfulness and is pretty much inseparable. So I think of it as a mindfulness strategy as well. In a way, when you show up with love, you have to be mindful. So let me just, I'm going to mute everyone. I don't know where the noise is coming from, not paying. Perfect. So I usually like to start these sessions with just a little bit of mindfulness to help us get in the mood and a little bit of mindful love in that setting. So find a comfortable seat where you are and take a minute to connect your sit bones or your ischial spines to whatever you're sitting on. And tilt your pelvis forward and sit up nice and tall. And with love and kindness, which is part of love, and compassion, which is part of love, stack your vertebrae one atop the other all the way up your spine, all the way through your neck towards the crown of your head. And reach the crown of your head towards the sky, uplifting upward towards the stars or the sun, whatever you've got happening wherever you are. And take in an inhale, stretching tall, and an exhale, letting things go. And bring a hand to heart, which is an act of love for yourself and is known scientifically to be helpful, to decrease stress and decrease cortisol and release oxytocin. Pressing that heel of the hand into the heart space, noticing how good that feels. And bring your other hand, place it atop the bottom hand, dorsum of one hand touching the palm of the other. Rub that palm, skin to skin contact. Also known to be good for your health, good for your stress. And take in another deep breath and an exhale, and pause and just check in with yourself with love. without judgment, without criticism, just noticing and being aware of how you feel in this moment. Also taking a moment to let go of frustration and judgments and resentments, perhaps of the day, things that happened that you wish hadn't. Showing up with love for yourself in this moment. And pausing for a moment to think of something about yourself that you love, something you wouldn't change. Whether it's your laugh or your sense of humor or your determination or your pinky toe, whatever it might be, one thing about yourself that you truly enjoy that you would never want to change. And take a moment and just tuck that into that pocket behind your heart space to tarry with you, reminding yourself of it when needed. Take in another long, deep, nourishing inhale and an exhale. And then draw your attention to something you would like to approach with love, something in your life. Could you bring love to that? And how might it change things? And so I offer the thought of one thing for yourself that you could approach with love that you haven't. Perhaps something in your body that doesn't work well, or perhaps something about yourself that you don't like, or something that you love, that you want to do. How can you approach it with love rather than judgment or criticism or pushing or striving? And then draw your attention to one thing that you could show up with more love for others, whether it's, in my case, a teenager who's not at his best, but perhaps a partner or a colleague or a difficult patient. How can you bring love to that interaction? Showing up with more love. And the invitation is love for you and love for them. And then taking a moment to think of one way that you could show up with more love for the world, bigger scale. Something in the world that you would like to show up for with love. Perhaps it's just enjoying nature. Perhaps it's eating more healthy or eating more green. Perhaps it's gardening, making something beautiful, whatever it might be. What's one small thing? These don't have to be huge things, just a shift that if you approached it with love, rather than something to do or something to change or something to fix, what would that be? And then take in another big, deep inhale and an exhale. And sit for one more moment. I'm going to offer a short reading from one of my favorite books called Journey to the Heart. And it's called Love Yourself Enough to Relax. Our bodies react to the world around us and within us in many ways. Our bodies act like sponges. They can soak up healing energy, or they can absorb and trap the negative energy of stress and tension. Some of us are so used to keeping our bodies tense and bound up, we don't even notice how much they hurt, how strained and tight our muscles are. Connect with your body. Learn to tell how tense it is. Take a few moments throughout the day to see what hurts, what aches, what muscles are being strained. Although tension can affect the entire body, many of us have favorite places in our body to store stress. Places that become tense and rigid and full of aches. Necks, shoulders, backs. They often become traps. Become familiar with your body and where it stores stress and tension. And then offer the opportunity to relax. Explore perhaps different options. Massage is a form of love, meditation, a hot bath, exercise, breathing, something to show yourself love. So take a moment here and notice where that tension is. And love yourself enough for just a short moment here to relax and let go. And take in another long, deep inhale and an exhale, letting things go. And you can slowly bring your hands back to your thighs and open your eyes if they're closed, and we'll come back together. Hopefully you feel a little bit better. So I wanted to start with the hardest part of what I see as love as a strategy, which is loving yourself. And to start off with the notion that loving yourself is really hard for many of us. And so the strategy might be to stop being mean to yourself to start as an expression of love. And the strategy even before that is to notice how often you're mean to yourself. And many of us don't even see it. And we're mean to ourselves in kind of secretive ways, sabotaging ourselves, or backhanded ways where we're pushing ourselves or not resting when we need to rest, things like that. And so I work with a lot of people who are experts at being mean to themselves. And we have to start by noticing it, and then start by being mean to yourself less, and then perhaps accepting yourself or being kind to yourself, and then getting to compassion, and then getting to love. So I offer, if the idea of self-love is really hard to do because you haven't ever thought about doing it, or for some of us, it was kind of judged as selfish to love yourself and treat yourself well, that at least start by not being mean to yourself as an act of love. And it's actually an incredible strategy. We spend so much energy and so much time and slow down our progress towards things that we would like to do in life and that we love in life by getting in our own way. The other thing is to have your own back. We often spend, as type A high achievers, time being mean to ourselves and criticizing ourselves and second guessing ourselves. And so offering the idea that you can have your own back and you can make the best decision you can in the moment and decide that it's a good decision because you made it. You can always make a new decision. But to me, that's part of showing up for yourself and loving yourself if those words resonate. And so in the spirit of focusing on yourself first, that being the most important relationship that we have with anybody, asking that question, which I always bring up, which is, what would love do? Whenever you ask that question and you're stuck, consider yourself first. So most of us don't consider ourselves first. We're experts at love would do this for our child, or this for our spouse, or this for our patients, or this for our colleagues, or our parents. And yet we don't consider ourselves in the equation. And we are at least equally important, and often more important, because we can control what we do for ourselves. We can control what we do for others, but we can't control how it's received. And so showing up for yourself with love is really the most powerful piece of this strategy. And then many of us get in the way of feeling love that comes our way. We send it out, but we have trouble receiving it. And so I just offer this idea of allowing yourself to receive love as a strategy as well. Many of us block what's there, or people send us stuff, but we really have trouble. If you're someone who has trouble maybe accepting gifts, or when people compliment you or praise you, it's very uncomfortable. That's the same idea of having challenges with what we call the capacity to have. And so love would let that in. And one of my favorite books, which I'm going to bring up a lot of books that are about love, because apparently I have full piles of them, is this Good Morning, I Love You book. And she talks about what you practice grows. And so practice showing up kind for yourself, practice letting love in. Maureen has her copy. And really, this idea of taking good care of yourself is one of the most powerful things that you can do. So one of the reasons I love this book is where I learned about the hand to heart practice. And she has a practice that she describes in the end, doing hand to heart every day, checking in with yourself. And ideally you say, good morning, I love you. I just say good morning, or even I actually don't say anything. I'll be fully transparent. I just put my hands to heart now because that's what's most comfortable for me. But the impact of it, connecting to yourself and being able to listen and hear, is an act of love. It's also allowing yourself to see your own inner wisdom. And for those in medicine, when we were taught not to really rely on our own inner wisdom, we were taught to rely on the outer wisdom and the protocols and the practice guidelines and what other people told us. We were not supposed to listen if we had to pee or eat or sleep. And so we weren't supposed to feel our feelings, and particularly emotional settings either. And so realizing that many of us have kind of stepped out of that and offering that this hand to heart practice as an act of love actually helps you listen. And when you start to listen, you learn a lot. And that's where love can be a tremendous strategy. And so transitioning from this idea to how you can eat with love or exercise with love. Most of us eat either by rules of this is what I eat or what I don't eat, or we eat at certain times, and we don't learn to listen to when our bodies want to eat and what it wants to eat. And I guarantee you that most of us don't want to eat food that doesn't agree with us and food that's not healthy because we don't feel that. But we don't take the time to eat, whether you want to call it mindfully or intuitively. I like to think of it as intuitively if you're listening. And so you can, when you eat with love, you're eating in a way that you feel good and you're taking care of yourself. And the pediatrician in me advises that when you do that and model that for your children and your grandchildren, they also learn to eat with love. And so that we can begin to shift our relationship with food. And for anyone who wants to learn more about that, we had a recent podcast on that, and I'm just feeling really, really strongly about it. And as I've started to think about it, I have actually changed the times of day that I eat and the way that I eat. And a lot of the foods that maybe you don't like because they don't agree with you. And so we don't allow children not to like food, but as an adult, pay attention. Usually you don't like something because it gives you a stomach ache, or you don't like it because it causes you heartburn. And so paying attention to what your body likes and doesn't like, and guaranteed it doesn't like things that aren't good for it for whatever reason, and knowing we're all different cellularly. The other thing that came up in that podcast, which really ties into love, is heart hunger. And it's often referred to in coaching as emotional eating. And I really like this idea of heart hunger. So our heart is hungry for something, and we tend to eat food instead. But love would not do that. Love would recognize that it's your heart that's hungry and treat that with love and kindness. And so maybe that's nourishing yourself in another way. And in that reading that I offered, it could be a hot bath that is nourishing yourself. It could be clean sheets, could be a walk, it could be a massage, or it could be just hand to heart. But thinking about where the hunger is coming from and acting with love around that. And love is kindness, and love is taking good care of yourself. And so realizing that taking good care of ourselves is also a strategy. We don't have to put that in the nooks and crannies of our day or not pay attention to it. It should actually be something that's sort of top of mind, because when you take care of yourself, you have much more capacity to take care of everyone else. And that's actually what love would do, would be to take care of yourself. So I wanted to throw out a few other ideas, and I'm curious then to hear if others of you think, how you think this strategy can be incorporated. But I also think you can exercise with love, in that if you listen to your body and listen to what it needs, you will find the kind of exercise that works. So is it yoga or is it Peloton? It's very different for different people. Everyone likes something different. Is it walking? Is it running? Is it, and it's going to be different on different days. So some days you'll want to push yourself and some days you won't. But as a society, we don't listen. We just do what the checkbox says or what's healthy, and 30 minutes a day. That's not actually acting lovingly, because love is listening, which is the mindful piece of it. And so if you're implementing love as a health strategy, you do things that feel good and are good, but your body actually knows. We've just learned to not listen. So I would encourage you to try it. In the beginning, we don't trust ourselves. We're sure that someone else knows better and that someone else can tell us exactly what to do. But if you actually are showing up with love for yourself, you won't harm yourself, because that's not loving, right? So it's impossible to do really mean things to yourself if you're showing up with love. Some thoughts also about approaching pain with love. Can be, what is this pain here to teach me? We often get mad at ourselves when we have chronic pain, or we have a chronic injury or a limitation or something that's getting in the way. And so love would ask better questions about that. and not necessarily make it go away, but welcome it in. What is it here to tell me? What would feel better? What's possible? How can I do this in a different way that doesn't hurt? Those are the kinds of questions that love would ask around pain. And love would not beat yourself up over whatever, chronic injury that you might have, or body part that doesn't work, or illness that you might have. It actually is accepting. If you think about it, accepting and allowing is what I would say love would do. I also think about love when you think about pivoting in your career or burnout. We get mad at ourselves and we think it's a failure or it's a problem that we're pivoting. But if you approach it with love, it's just pursuing a passion. What do you want to be doing now? What do you want to do more of or less of? Those are the questions that love would ask. And that's why it can be used as a strategy. The other reason I think it's so helpful is that love is about curiosity. And so we don't get in that box of, I don't know what to do and I'm stuck and I'll make the wrong choice. That's not loving. And so when you bring in love, you all of a sudden are sort of opening doors, and that can be a really cool thing. So around relationships, it's also really curiosity. And I think we wait so often for others to show up with love rather than showing up with love ourselves. And so we often say, if you want to feel love, you show up with love. You show up loving if you want love. And so that is true, whether it's a cranky teenager or a spouse who's not doing the right thing. We often think they should do this. That shows love. They should buy me flowers for Valentine's Day. But that's what your brain, the stories your brain is telling you, which aren't necessarily true or helpful. And so maybe tell a different story. Maybe they show love in a different way. So looking for the love, and or just showing up with love yourself in offering love in that sense, and then see what comes back. I work with lots of people who are struggling in relationships. And what I think really happens is we think the other person is not acting loving enough, or they're not supporting us well enough, or they doing things that aren't supportive. And so my thought is that when we step out of that, if we want to feel supported, we can support ourselves and we support others and we will feel supported. And it feels a little frustrating, like, why do I have to make the change? But love would make the change because you're going to feel better yourself. And then you can see what happens to everyone else. But why suffer if you don't need to? That's the thought. Love doesn't choose suffering. It doesn't mean that life's going to be all fabulous. It just means you don't suffer and struggle unnecessarily. And showing up with love is not doing that. And so this is where I find, if you just ask that question, that what would love do, I can always figure out the answer. And so my teenager was quite obnoxious last night. and as all teenagers are at some point, but showing up with love, I was like, I wouldn't make this worse right now. Right. I don't even have to be heavy handed. It doesn't mean that I won't set a boundary, because love would set a boundary, or love would let him know that this isn't okay with you. But if you really start to think, okay, well, what would love do in this moment? And that takes pausing and being present, by the way, rather than just reacting at the obnoxiousness. And ask that question, you can start to see solutions that you just hadn't even thought of before. And so I offer that. Same thing with toddlers, or love sometimes tells a different story. I often talk about toddler temper tantrums. And so love tells the story of that as they're resetting, right? And they are. It's like, so it doesn't say, I have a terrible child who's never going to learn how to do anything. It can't go anywhere. And who knows what's going to happen to them when they grow up, which is the story that most of our brains go into. And so love wouldn't tell a story like that. And so to me, it's pausing in the moment and saying, what would love do in this moment? And that can be really, really helpful. So, and then the other thought I have is just about leading with love for people who are in leadership, because I think I see so much about this is how you're a good leader and this is what you're supposed to do. And my thought is, if you show up as a human who's taking care of other humans, who are taking care of other humans, which is really what we're doing in medicine, and you show up with love, all of those people show up with love, there's no problem, right? And so to me, if you're thinking about mindful leadership, that's really where you can show up. If we show up that way, we're not judging, we're not criticizing, we're not arguing. And love actually does disagree. There's, you know, think about it. It doesn't mean you don't disagree. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It's not at all. It's just showing up with that very spacious, curious, compassionate, generous. And so I immediately go back to the tenets of mindfulness. And just if you run through them, love is an act, all of them. Noticing is loving, being aware is loving, being intentional is loving, paying attention is loving. And so being mindful actually is essentially love. But to me, it's a very different way of thinking about strategy and performance and even finding your purpose. Like you can't really find your purpose if you show up judging yourself, for example. And so you have to step out of that, and stepping into love, it makes it much more easy to find it. So I'm curious if people have thoughts, if you want to share them. Anyone, you can unmute if you want. That's probably the easiest.